So here we are. Thank you for class for attending. We talk a lot about, of course, this is environmental and scientific communication. We talk a lot about it. I think it's a great exercise to have to really work with somebody and come up with some communication. As you saw earlier, I have the prompt and some examples for a short story about what we do today. So you all be prepared to ask some questions. Think of what you want to write and let that guide you answering the questions. But without further ado, here's Dr. Jennifer Boyd. Tell us about what you do here, what your background is, what's your interest. She travels internationally a lot. So ask her all about all sorts of stuff. Tell us.
Yeah, can I screen share? Okay, so I'm just gonna share some pictures. You should be able to see my slides now, right?
All right, we're
Yes.
there.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, hey, everybody. Yeah, so I was asked to talk a little bit about my background and what I do here. So I'm going to start with background and just go through this chronologically. Yeah, I have a background in communication and also in science. And right now I'm a scientist, but I'll talk a little bit about my background in communications and also, just my experience in like working with media. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is the city that you see here. Some people think that Chattanooga looks like a smaller version of Pittsburgh. I think it looks like a much smaller version of Pittsburgh, but I could see it. There are bridges and rivers and stuff. But I grew up in the city. So I grew up in a very blue collar environment, and I was a first generation college student when I went to school. And I grew up like in the city, so I didn't have a lot of like environmental, I don't know, experience either. I felt like I mean, I didn't realize at the time, but there was a big disconnect, I think, between me and nature. So that wasn't ever a field that I thought I would go into. So I started college thinking that I would major in English because in school, that's what I was told that I was really good at. So that sounded pretty good to me. So I ended up going to a small liberal arts college. And the main reason why I chose that college is because I got some money for swimming. So I swam in college, not like D1 or anything, but like small liberal arts college, but it opened up some doors for me. So I went to Allegheny College, which is about 2 hours or so north of Pittsburgh. And so when I was there, I had to take like some general education type classes, much like you all have to do here at UTC. And because it was an English major, some of my general education classes were natural science classes. So I basically had to take like, Bio 1 and Bio 2 or Chem 1 and Chem 2 or whatever. So I chose environmental science 1 and 2 because I just thought that sounded easier than chemistry or physics or biology with all the pre-med majors. So I'm like, yeah, sure, environmental science sounds good. So I get into this class and it's very like hands-on and we do things outside. And that's where I realized like, I really like this. Like I had no idea that this was something that I liked, but I just felt like it was so applicable. And I don't know, just really enjoyed it. So then I decided I was going to double major. So I ended up with a major in environmental science and English. And we had to do like, we called them senior comprehensive projects. They're kind of like a DHON thesis at UTC, but everybody had to do them. And so I had to do 1 in English and 1 in science. And, that was a lot. And I guess the whole time I was finishing up college, I was really just thinking about like careers where I could marry those 2 majors, right? So I really liked writing and was thinking about a career as a writer of some sort. And so I thought, oh, I'll be a science journalist. Like That sounds good. And I'll say also in school, I was on the newspaper staff. And so I edited my newspaper as a senior. I will say I skipped a lot of classes to do newspaper work. So I got really into newspaper work. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to be a science journalist. And so I really spent my whole senior year trying to build up my portfolio to go to Columbia University, because that's, one of the best journalism schools. And so that was really my dream and my aspiration. So I did an internship with the Pittsburgh Press, which was a newspaper at that time. And that one was nice because it was close to home. Like, I just lived at home and did my internship there one summer. And then the summer right after I graduated, I did an internship at the Erie Daily Times, which was a newspaper in Erie, Pennsylvania, which I think is like the third largest city in Pennsylvania, right after Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, but it's pretty far after those. So I did an internship there. So I was just trying to build up my portfolio, took a gap year so that I could really work on writing. And then I applied for journalism school at Columbia, and I got in, and I was like super excited. So that's where I ended up. Now, this is where the story goes a little bit off the rails, because I was in this science journalism program, and I was so excited. It was a 2-year science journalism program in the School of Journalism. Dream comes true. I'm at Columbia studying journalism. And the science journalism program then was really new. It was a unique program that not a lot of schools had. And it was designed because there was always this disconnect between scientific information that was really technical but important and like the general public. And so science journalism programs grew because they felt this need for people who really understand science but also can communicate it to the public, right? So I got into that program. So my first semester was just basic like journalism school. We were each assigned to a beat in New York City and, had to follow that area and write about it. And my second semester was a hands-on experience. I had to work with a faculty member in one of the science departments at Columbia and do work in their lab. Just to get that experience of being a scientist. So I was matched up with somebody who was at the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department, which has some lab spaces outside of the city, this beautiful campus called Lamont. And so I got matched up with somebody there. I just really integrated well into their lab. When my semester was over, I was really, sad about not continuing with the research. My plan was to continue doing the research during the summer with that person. And then, I don't know, talked me into maybe I should pursue a PhD in science. And I'm like, okay, I didn't feel as prepared for that, but I'm like, I'll apply. And if I get it, and I'll do that. And if I don't, I'll continue with journalism school. And I got in. So I decided at that time that I would always be able to write as a scientist. But if I was a journalist, I probably wouldn't be doing science on the side. So that was my thinking. So I went ahead and got my PhD in science. And then after I got my PhD, I had a postdoctoral fellowship with the National Park Service. And that was kind of my first taste of having to communicate my work to scientists, but also because I was being funded by this agency that is very public facing, right? The National Park Service. I also had to communicate everything I did to a more general audience. So I did work in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is there on the right, and then another national park, which is on the left. And I'm wondering if any of you have any guesses as to which national park that is. And I'll give you some hints. It's the biggest national park in the continental US, and it's also the least visited national park in the continental US. Does anybody know what it is or have any guesses?
Not Yellowstone.
It's not Yellowstone, because Yellowstone is very, very heavily visited.
Uh, not a clue.
It's Big Bend National Park in Texas.
Oh,
So both of these parks you can see in this picture have elevational gradients. And at the time I was doing work looking at sort of the ability of plant species to migrate upward in elevation, which has climate change applications. So that was the work that I did as a postdoc. But like I said, this was the first time where I had to communicate science outside of just the scientific community. So started, realizing the challenges of that. But I felt like my background in journalism school, even though it wasn't a complete 2-year program, was really helpful in that regard. And then after I finished up my postdoc, I came to UTC. So I've been at UTC since 2008. So this is my 16th year on the faculty, and I teach in the Department of Biology, Environmental Science, and Geology. I teach ecology, plant ecology. I teach a class called Science for the Anthropocene, a class called Global Change Biology, and I'm teaching a seminar on species rarity right now. And then my research. So I have kind of 3 areas of research, and right now I'm pursuing the third one the most heavily, but my background and training was in plant ecology and a field that we call ecophysiology, which is basically like thinking about the physiological processes that are going on inside of an organism and how that translates to, with plants, their growth and their representation in the natural world. So I was looking a lot at like photosynthesis and thinking about questions like, well, if it's photosynthesizing more, then that would explain why we see more of it. I'm very interested in responses of plants to global change. So this is where I think my background in environmental science really comes into things. I'm very applied in my focus. So I look at things like deforestation and invasive species and climate change and urbanization and their impacts on species. And then right now, most of my research is very focused on species rarity and rare species conservation. So these pictures here are all plant species that are endemic to the southeastern US. The third one there, the purple daisy looking one, that's the Tennessee coneflower. That's your state rare species. If you didn't know you had a state rare species, that's it. But I look at the ways that rare species respond to change compared to the ways more common species respond to change. And my hypothesis is basically that species that are rare because they don't do well with change, which we're experiencing a lot of now. But the Earth's always been a really dynamic place historically. So that could explain rarity. So that's where a lot of my research is focused right now. And that research is funded by the National Science Foundation, which is a taxpayer-funded agency. So for scientists, for biologists, I should say, there's really, maybe all scientists, there's really 2 big sources of funding in the US. So if your research is human health focused, then it would be funded through the National Institutes of Health, or the NIH. And if it's not health focused, which is where mine is, then it can be funded by the National Science Foundation, or the NSF. And these are my collaborators. We're all moms. We all have kids. We all have kids of different ages. But I collaborate with scientists at the University of Georgia, primarily, also collaborator at Austin P up in Clarksville, and then at a small school in Pennsylvania called Seton Hill University. My collaborator there, when she started on this project, was a postdoc at the University of Kentucky. And so NSF funded scientists also have to do this thing. So if I go to here, I'll show you. Like this is where it starts. So hold on, I have to unscreen share for a minute. Okay, I'm now sharing my entire desktop with you. So if I do a search, sorry, I've got my bar here in the way. Here we go. On NSF awards, avoid rarity. So this should pop up my award. Yeah, so this is the NSF awards database. And if you get funded, you have to write up an abstract for this. So like it tells you all this stuff about the award, but then this is my abstract. So there's two abstracts here. The first one is the one that is for the general public. So if you read that abstract, it's, you know, it's just, there's more explaining. There's less scientific terms. When I do use scientific terms, I explain what they mean. So you try to break things down into a format that would be appropriate for the general public. And the reason they do this is because it's a taxpayer funded agency. So you all, theoretically, if you're paying taxes, are paying for scientific research that NSF funds. And so as taxpayers, you need to be able to understand the research that's being funded. So this is the general public version of the abstract. And then this one is the science version. So yeah, Jack, I don't know if you know about this, but you could look up like all kinds of awards in this database and they all have the exact same thing where you have to have your general public abstract and then your scientist abstract. And it's a really cool, I think, exercise, right? To think about if you just look at the scientific one, how might you translate this into something that the general public would understand?
Do you help others do this? Because you have the background to be able
Yeah,
to.
I don't know. I haven't helped people do it, but I will say like they have people at NSF that are not scientists, they're communicators, right? So NSF hires people with communications background and they help with this. So
Because if
yeah.
you're interested in jobs, how do you get into a field like that, being a science communicator?
You know, I don't know. I'll have to ask next time I'm on a panel, but I don't think everybody at NSF has a scientific background. I think that they are interested in science, right? But they need people who can write, and especially to translate scientific information for a more general public audience. And right now, NSF has this big push in research. I will say, like, over the past, I don't know, maybe about 2 decades ago, there started to be this big push. So this happened, you know, back when I was like grad school, postdoc, but there was this big push for scientists to be better communicators, right? It was all about like being able to communicate with a general audience. Now it kind of goes a step further. It's starting to go further than that. So now there's an emphasis on scientists not only to better translate their scientific information to a general audience, but also to engage the public more in science. So that's something NSF is really focused on now. And I don't know if they'll be like doing hires for people to especially help with that or not, but I feel like they're going beyond just basic communication at this point. But I sometimes have my students do this where I'll have them like look at these, just show them the scientific abstract and then try to translate it.
Send any links on how to access that.
Yeah, they just have a big awards database and you can go in there and like they have you can just see recent awards and like we can just pop on one of these. Like if I just pop up, I don't know, I'm gonna look at something boring like photosynthesis, which I think is really exciting. But if I look in here, you know, here's a proposal. And if I read this, see, it's the same. They've got, here's your scientific abstract, and then here's your general public abstract.
We find people, the communication class, to do that communication.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a pretty.
Is that through the National Science Foundation? Do you know of other quasi governmental agencies? Who employs people with the backgrounds we're working with here?
Yeah, I mean, I think like NSF, I will say communicators at NSF do more than this too. Like, so one thing they do is they try to like help communicate things with the public. If you look at like, I mean, I'm just using NSF as an example because it's our big taxpayer funded agency. But if you look at their website, right, it's not, well, this is not it. Hold on. NSF.gov, not .org. Here we go. If you look at their website, like it's very public oriented, right? It's not just a website for scientists, but the first things you see are like really cool videos and like, here's what we do, right? And then this is pretty, like, to me, this looks pretty user friendly. It's not just for scientists. So they're really, trying to outwardly communicate with the public in all of these ways. And then they also hire people to basically do like editorial work. So I just served on a panel a couple of weeks ago. So serving on a panel means that to get money from NSF, you have to write a grant proposal. And I mean, like, they're extensive. They're 15 pages long, they have all these supporting materials and things. And so NSF puts together periodically panels of scientists in certain disciplines to read through these grant proposals and help to make recommendations about what they should fund and what's not fundable. And so I just finished serving on one of those. And when you serve on one of those, you make comments to the scientific staff at NSF about why you are recommending a proposal or why you're not recommending a proposal. You point out the strengths and weaknesses of that. And then they have people who help with the panels that help you to formulate that in a written way that is, comes across as like neutral, right? Like it's supposed to, like, I might say to a scientific officer during one of these panels, like, this is terrible. They haven't cited any of this stuff, I haven't, but you're not going to write that. So you try to write it more like, this proposal would really benefit from stronger depiction of the literature and how this research would advance scientific knowledge beyond what we know now. So they basically help you like take what you're thinking and communicate it in a way that's appropriate for the author of a grant proposal. And then they also go in and just do editorial work. You'll get your reviews put into their system, and then a copy editor will come through at the end and be like, oh, you have 2 periods after this word, or you need a comma before this, or this is misspelled, or anything like that. So they're checking it for that because they want, these reviews to look very professional because people have worked really hard on these grant proposals. So, there's all kinds of communication that goes into just scientific funding. So yeah, and I'll say too, like the last couple papers I published, they wanted sort of in addition to my scientific abstract, a couple of bullet points that were more for a general public audience. So I think there's just a lot more emphasis on that in science in general.
So it is really the National Science Foundation, the major direction?
It is. Yes, there's 2 big ones. It's National Science Foundation, basic research, basic scientific research. NIH, National Institutes of Health, is basic human health research. And then you have some other agencies too, like NOAA funds things, EPA funds things, US Fish and Wildlife, US Department of Agriculture, but NSF is the big funding agency. So like, as an example, my rarity research project with all those women that I showed you, that was funded at like $1.1 million for 6 years, right? So like, that's where the really big funding comes from. Yeah.
So it's all public. There's not much.
It's all public. Yep.
Private.
It's completely taxpayer funded. So, Congress every year decides how much is appropriated for different, parts of the government, and NSF is part of their budget.
So that didn't know it was that tight. I thought it might have more diverse opportunities.
Yeah, now within NSF, there is a lot of diversity. They have different directorates. So there's like environmental biology, there's directorate of like earth system processes, there's directorates of computation. I mean, it's all kinds of science. They even handle like nuclear energy. So, I just stick with like the environmental biology directorate, but there's lots of directorates. But this is like the agency that is supposed to make sure that, the US is at the forefront of scientific research, and that we are doing science that will hopefully like help to enlighten us about how the Earth system works and maybe help us to find solutions for some of the big environmental issues that we're facing.
What extent,
Sorry, I don't know what's happening.
so to what
One
extent,
of my son just dropped a can down, like a beverage can down our steps. That was that giant commotion you all just heard. He's sorry, he says so.
they've seen my dogs, they understand these things
Yeah.
happen. To what extent does the funding drive your research? What kind of latitude do you have to um, pursue your own interests? How's that balance work?
Yeah. So, I mean, the more you do, it's like any job, right? I feel like the more that you do your job, so the more that I do science, the more I realize like the parts of it I like and don't like the most, right? So like you want to figure out ways to do more of what you like. I will say I'm pretty driven at this point to support students in research, right? So a lot of the funding that I got, like when I say I got $1.1 million, I want to be clear, like literally that's not coming to me, right? I mean, like the institution gets that. And most of that goes to things like paying tuition for students or keeping the electricity on at UTC, right? So there's a lot of overhead costs that get taken out of it. I am able to pay myself like a summer month because we're 9-month employees. So I can pay myself like an extra 10th or 11th month with my grants. And I get to travel a lot. And so that's one thing I really like about my job, right? I love like collaborating with new people and traveling. And so I mean, if you want to be able to do those things, then you have to have funding. So like as part of my NSF grant, we worked a lot with a mathematical biologist at Oxford University in England. So I got to travel there. This past summer, I was invited to be a keynote speaker at a conference in Sicily, and I do speak Italian, so I went. They speak Sicilian there, but they also speak Italian, so that's good. So that was fun. I've gone with undergraduates to a conference in Germany. So I like to, and I'll say I just got an email yesterday from one of the people who is at the conference in Italy who wants to now collaborate on a project. So like I like meeting new people. I'm working right now with a postdoc from the Czech Republic who is applying for a Fulbright. Her deadline is actually midnight tonight. So she's applying for a Fulbright to come and work with me at UTC, hopefully next fall. So yeah, I feel like if you want to be able to get out there, collaborate, travel, right, then having funding is really important.
Well, that you really covered a lot of that. Class, what do you think that you need? I mean, she's given us plenty to work with. What do you folks think? Anybody? This is what I'm finding hard in a lot of my classes.
Same.
Yeah. And again, you folks, this is some of the challenge, is trying to not just be repeating what your client or the person you're working with says, but for you to visualize what you want to visualize what your end product is going to be. Their major project is to do a media package of several different things: news,
Okay.
press release, a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, uh, what do you do? You're doing a lot within the NSF. How about on your own? How do people find out about your work, your projects? How do
So,
you,
yeah, I have a really poorly updated website right now. So, most scientists do have a personal website. Like I said, my website, I wish I had time to update it more, but I don't. But I do have a website, and if I get some free time, I will go in and do that. So I can show you that really quickly. It's here. So this is my website, right? Like you can see there's me, there's my projects, student engagement, some outreach, right? How to contact me. So, I do have a website. Like I said, I wish it was more updated. It could use an update. I also, there've been, like when I got the big NSF grant, or when I had a grad student that got a fellowship from NSF last year, there's always working with the communications office at UTC to try to get a press release out, right? And they'll interview you. And, this is one of the things that was, I think, so great about like the science journalism program is it was motivated by this idea that scientists were also often like very reluctant to talk to journalists because they felt like they wouldn't get whatever they were saying correct, right? And journalists can be hesitant to talk to scientists because, I don't know, they're intimidating and you might not understand what they're saying, right? So you have to like kind of work between those. And I'll say that happens. Like, I mean, I'll give an interview to, you just don't, hopefully you don't know anybody over there, but and they'll get some things wrong, right? And so I always ask to see anything beforehand. I'm not interested in changing their writing style or any of the other stuff, but just making sure the science is depicted correctly. So I think, not being afraid to go over things with a client, right? You don't have to show them your entire article, but like going over key points, making sure that you really understand things is totally okay. I think sometimes it makes them feel more confident in you because you are taking the time to make sure that you've got it right.
Class, a lot of that depends on the venue. Now, if you're
Mhm.
through our communications department, everybody wants to get things absolutely right.
Yeah.
But if you're working for the Pittsburgh Press, and I knew friends there,
Oh, yeah.
uh, they're maybe a little less uh, open about letting you see the work in advance. Have you had any issues?
Yeah. Like what I'm saying is I wouldn't show them everything, but just, or ask to see everything, but just, hey, can I just go over that and make sure that part's right? Just the science part of it, I think is good. Like respecting their work, but also just making sure that I want to make sure that you really understand, what this is about or whatever is good. I will say that the biggest like writing advice, I guess I'll call it, that I ever got was like when I was interning for the Pittsburgh Press. And I remember, I got this internship and it was a competitive internship. And like, I felt like totally in college, I'm a great writer and I'm editing my school newspaper and I'm thinking like, I'm so good at this. And I walked in there and like the first couple of articles I wrote, this copy editor, her name was Janice. She would call you over to her desk and like go over all the stuff. And like after like number 3 time this happened, like she just got meaner and meaner. And so like myself and the other interns, we automatically just like learned to copy edit our work because nobody wanted to go over to her desk. And after a couple of weeks of just turning in perfect stuff, she came over and was like, I'm not really mean. I just do that to like get you guys to do your jobs. So I'm like, when students turn in stuff and it's not like spell checked or grammar edited, that really frustrates me because I don't know. I just am
Well,
very used to doing that
it is
now.
one of those sort of things that if your credibility is a little iffy,
Hmm.
going to start, if you have, they're going to start questioning other things beyond spell. If you don't have something
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So always like being as professional as possible.
questioning others.
Mhm.
So, it's not just one article. And that's,
Mhm.
you know, depending on who you're working with, this is the big disconnect that we've talked about from the beginning of this class, trying to make that bridge between this, and you've lived it.
Mhm.
do you do any popular writing anymore, or?
No, so that was like my goal, right? That's what I told myself in grad school is like, I'm going to be a scientist, and in all my free time, I'm going to freelance. And then there is literally no free time. But I will say my favorite part of being a scientist is writing grant proposals, because I feel like it's where I get to engage my creative process the most, right? So like you are really putting, I mean, a grant proposal is like basically a sell. I mean, you're trying to, it'd be like if you were writing as a freelancer and trying to, sell an article or market a piece to an editor. It's very similar in that your job is, you're the one asking for something, right? You're the one asking for money. So your job is to tell them what you're going to do and why it's really important and why it's really exciting. And so you have to like put together that type of package to get funded. And I like doing that. That's my favorite part of being a scientist. I always say I like the creative process of putting together grant proposals, and people are like, well, they don't think of science as being a very creative field, but it really is in some aspects. And those are the things that I gravitate to the most. And I think that is because of my, training and my interests.
What are the biggest, what are your biggest grants, biggest projects that you're most proud of?
Yeah, the Rarity Project I'm super proud of, because not only was it funded, but it was a project where I brought together a whole new group of collaborators. So I actually like just read people's papers, and I needed somebody to do this, and I wasn't an expert in this. So I found somebody and approached them. So I was really proud of just the collaboration that came together with that project. I was also proud of, I wrote an NSF grant to get some really like fancy equipment called controlled environment grow chambers. But when I came to UTC, I was the first plant ecologist in my department. So I didn't inherit like somebody's old lab with a bunch of stuff. And so I was able to basically like outfit a state-of-the-art lab facility through a grant proposal. So I was really proud of that. And the chamber, I mean, that lab's still there and students use it, my classes use it. So it's really cool to like think about growing that from literally from the ground up.
Where is it if somebody wants to take a picture?
It's in Grody 110. You can like put your ear to the door and you'll hear the hum of the chambers. But yeah, sometimes we're in there. And yeah, it's great. So that was all. I always say it is incredible that as a scientist, you can put words on a piece of paper, or in today's day and age, on a computer screen, and you can get money for it. Lots of money for it if you do it well.
That's good to hear for everybody. You've just covered it all. I can't thank you enough.
Sure, this was fun. It's always fun to talk about yourself.
Guys, do you have any questions? See, we do this. I've been on both sides of this. So, I mean, I have an idea of how I would approach it, but there's not just one way. You could have a personality profile. You could talk about the lab and her work. You can take this any number of ways. The key is to start with a good lead and let it go from there.
That is true. The lead is super important. I remember that from writing.
We have several of our students here. This is the first communication course. This is a 4,000 level course with no prerequisites.
So, okay.
This is the first time I'm teaching.
Oh, I'm teaching a 4,000 level course right now with no prerequisites too. Yeah, you have all kinds of backgrounds
to meet their needs, and writing leads is a big part of it. So yeah, but they're great people. I'm very proud to work with them. They're students really getting it, and I can't say how proud I am of them. Any other stuff? Well, if you could turn it back over to me, and now by doing that, you can put it, Dr. Boyd, up in the box, turn it back over to me. And
oh yeah, okay. Let me see. Make host. There you go.
Right. And you can now, and I'll remember how to do that henceforth, but you folks, if you have any questions of me, of her, I've shared contact information and she always answers very quickly.
Mhm. That's
Any,
right.
any other questions? All right, I think we're set.
Thanks. Thanks
So
for having me visit.
I appreciate it.